One of the most obvious signs of depression is being angry all the time. That's definitely you. Also, you may have been going through menopause for about 10 years. In fact, you may be the person with the longest known case of menopause. From losing a family member young to losing another while going through a shocking legal battle with someone he loved deeply, we've been entertained by Pawn Stars for decades. One of the most interesting reality TV shows ever, we've been able to enjoy what seems to be the perfect mix of history, entertainment, and business all in one show. First and foremost, we've enjoyed watching one of the show's co-founders, Rick Harrison, make history over the years. This is because he had worked in the shop for most of his life and has been able to help it grow and expand over the years, even though the store has been through some tough times. The show kept growing over the years, but that doesn't mean Rick didn't have to go through some tough times on his way up. It all began when Rick was born on March 22, 1965, the son of Richard Benjamin Harrison and Joanne Rue Harrison. He was the third of his parents' 4 children. Well, he learned something. You get more out of a book, Rick. You like to argue a lot? I don't like to argue. You guys turn it into arguments. No, you like... To Rick's first tragedy was the death of his oldest sister, Joanne Harrison. But that wasn't the end of a tough childhood for him and his family. As they got used to losing the oldest child, they soon had to get used to the fact that Rick started having seizures when he was 8 years old. To deal with this condition, Rick found that he liked to spend a lot of his free time reading books. According to him, this turned into a lifelong love of reading. At least he might be able to spend the rest of his life reading a series of books by John D. Fitzgerald called The Great Brain. Rick's love for these books, which were about the adventures of a 10-year-old Utah con artist named Tom D. Fitzgerald, lasted into adulthood. One would find that Rick still had other interests, whether they were fictional or not. For example, he loved physics and history. He was especially interested in the Royal Navy, especially in the late 1700s. He also seemed to like business, since he dropped out of Taft Middle School in the 10th grade to focus on selling fake Gucci bags for about $2,000 a week, which some of us watching this video think is a pretty good return. Maybe this was because Rick's parents' real estate business failed in 1981, and it was time for Rick and his siblings to start their own business. I just wasted a lot of money on 2 $500 bills that are only worth $1,000. It may or may not have been the best or worst time for Rick to have his first child, but by the time he was 17, he also had to deal with the fact that his girlfriend Kim was pregnant with his child. Rick decided to step up at the end of the day so that he could raise his first child. But he and Kim had to go through tragedy when they lost the baby to a miscarriage. Luckily, the couple was able to get back together. Soon after, on April 27, 1985, they welcomed Corey into the world. This would be the start of a lifelong relationship because Corey has become an important part of the Pawn Star team, and we're sure Ricky won't have it any other way. Over time, Corey gained a brother when his parents had Adam. Unfortunately, this would be the end of this young family because Rick and Kim decided in 1985 that it might be best for them to go their separate ways within a year. During this divorce, Rick met Tracy, who would later become his second wife. Tracy was now working for Harrison and was helping Rick raise his 2 boys. Tracy's influence must have been good for Rick's career because he was always able to pursue his interest in history. This soon paid off when his father opened a good coin shop in Las Vegas and Rick was there to help make it a success. What more could you ask for a son, thanks to his ability to give advice? Giving each item for sale in the store a bit of a historical background made them more appealing to customers who came in. Soon, though, Rick realized he needed to do a bit more to make ends meet now that he was raising a family. Soon he discovered that he was taking cars back from angry owners as a side job. Rick, Corey, what are your concerns? I just want to make sure it's a GT, and I need to know if I can get it back to beautiful condition without putting me in bankruptcy court. This seemed to support Rick and his growing family for about 5 years. After that time, Rick and his father had saved enough to move their business to a bigger and better location on Fremont Street. However, this wasn't long-lasting and may have been a bit too soon, as the family soon realized they had to move again because they had lost the lease on that property. Wanting to make the most of this time of change, Rick and his dad thought this might be the best time for them to open a pawn shop for a while, but they quickly realized that they couldn't because of a law from the 1950s that says only a certain number of pawn licenses can be issued. Apparently, the number of licenses issued depended on the population of the area. So Rick and his father knew they had to wait until the population of their city reached a total of 250,000. They applied for this license, and by 1989, they had it, after some legal problems. Rick and Rick Jr. were finally happy to let customers into the gold and silver pawn shop. Once they were open, they decided to focus on selling rare sports items and historical items that they could find. You may be wondering why they call it a half eagle. Well, it's a $5 gold piece, and the eagle was her standard gold coin, so that's what everyone used. It was a $10 gold piece, and the really cool thing is that you almost never see one with a C on the back of it. Over time, though, they learned that selling jewelry made them the most money. As a result, they quickly saw that their business was finally getting a name in Las Vegas. By the mid-2000s, they saw that they were lending millions of dollars each year, which helped them make hundreds of thousands of dollars in interest. It looked like business couldn't be better. Even though they were making a lot of money from selling jewelry, they were still happy to be able to make a lot of money from selling interesting sports items that buyers were interested in because of their interesting history. For example, take a look at this 2001 Super Bowl ring that they had for sale. Once sold, sales like this helped them become more popular, and soon Rick and his dad were working with the History Channel to make the Pawn Stars TV show we watch today. Brent Montgomery and Colby Gaines came up with the idea for the show back in 2008. They got the idea while traveling through Las Vegas, fell in love with some of the interesting pawn shops they saw. They thought that one of these shops could be the setting for one of the most interesting reality TV shows you'd see today. Just imagine if they based the show on a family-owned shop. They'd have to figure out how to store all the items they would need to film the show. They had to find this family-owned pawn shop first. Luckily for everyone, they found the Harrison family and their famous gold and silver pawn shop. At that point, the Harrison family was used to being in front of the cameras because they had been the subject of a PBS documentary a few years before, so they were ready for the cameras. Rick had also been thinking about wanting to make a show based on the Harrison family. Since the Harrison family had been running their shop for a while, the timing seemed ideal for everyone. Soon, the Pawn Stars show came on, letting us see how they made a living selling jewelry and old things. On the show, "What can I help you with?" I offered to sell my buttons, which belonged to Marie Antoinette. Do you know much about Marie Antoinette? At this point, business was going well, especially since the shop had about 10,000 items in stock. Along with the interesting things in the store, the show quickly became more popular over the years thanks to good reviews from fans. By January 2011, Pawn Stars was so popular that it was the most watched show on the History Channel and the second most watched reality TV show after Jersey Shore. Because business was so good over the years, Rick thought that at some point anyone who had been this successful should write down their life story. He gave us permission to use his autobiography, A. When it came out, it did so well that it reached number 22 on the New York Times bestsellers list by June 26, 2011. Unfortunately, that was the best thing that could happen to Rick at that point in time, because before the end of the year he divorced his second wife and was soon seen getting close to Deanna. This helped him get himself and his store back on track for success thanks to his hard work and the popularity of his show. Soon he started to get more attention and started making cameos on TV shows like iCarly, The Middle, and The Bachelor. During this time of success, Rick also had to make things official with Deanna, and soon they were married at Laguna Beach, California. Deanna's 3 daughters joined the family, making Rick's total number of children 6. Over time, Rick continued to get more attention and started appearing on more TV shows and getting more endorsement deals. Unfortunately, this happened just before Rick was about to experience another low point was when he finally lost his father, who could have been ready to say goodbye to the old man he was known as on the show. So what do you think? Happy anniversary, Pops. I tell you what, this is class. This is pimp. This is class. I'm exed. I mean, it's beautiful. You can take Grandma out on her 50th wedding anniversary in style. That I will definitely do. All of his fans mourn the tragic death of this longtime veteran. He finally lost his battle with Parkinson's disease. The whole Pawn Star family and universe knew they'd miss the old man Richard Gerald Harrison. As hard as it must have been for Rick, he knew he had to get past his pain so that he could take full control of the shop. Now that he was in charge, he was the only one on ground to keep the ship steady when COVID-19 hit, the pandemic that threatened to wipe out humanity in particular. There were a lot of problems for businesses like Harrison's famous pawn shop. It's strange that the pawn shop had so much trouble because we thought they'd be able to take advantage of the fact that everyone was having a hard time at the time. There must have been a lot of people who needed cash quickly, but that wasn't the case. After the world got over the coronavirus, Rick said that the pandemic had also made things hard. Not just his shop, but the whole pawn industry seemed to take a hit when everyone had to stay home and only go out to do important things. Most people didn't feel like going to the pawn shop was high on their list of things to do. As if that wasn't bad enough, Rick saw that he had to shut down his operations for a while because the COVID-19 pandemic looked like it was getting worse. This happened in March 2020, when they had to close the tourist section of Tribal. There was a sign in the store for about a month that said it still had an open financial department, so people could see that loans and business transactions could still happen during the pandemic. It was clear right away that Rick and his team were ready to fight during these tough times. Rick even said they were willing to help their customers, as evidenced by the fact that he lowered interest rates and gave people more time to pay back their loans in April 2020. They were selling things because they knew this was a hard time for many people. For Rick, this may have been a way to repay a town that had done so much for him. For Rick, this wasn't a big deal because he was sure the economy would get better in 6 months. Unfortunately, this wasn't to be, and by the end of the year, the gold and silver pawn shop had only made about $37,000. What are you talking about? In 1937, they didn't have cell phones, so they used telegrams instead. All the pieces in provenance in the world were shocked. The business had been used to making about $1 million a year. Damn the COVID-19 pandemic. As you can imagine, this was a very bad time for Rick and his family. Things got even worse when Rick had to get ready for yet another divorce. It looked like Dean and Rick had grown apart too much, so it didn't make sense for them to stay married. Sad times for sad people who want to move on. Rick found comfort in the fact that, with help from Corey and his best friend, Austin Chumley Russell, Rick did get back on his feet. In fact, he must be a ladies' man because within a year he was married to Amanda Palmer, making her his fourth wife. Hopefully, the fourth time's the charm in this case. Things were going as well as they should have, but Rick had to face reality when he had to deal with legal issues he was having with his own mother. Unbelievable as it may seem, they were in court because some disagreement about who owned the gold and silver pawn shop. As you can imagine, their relationship was broken, as was the contract that accused Rick of breaking. According to her, Rick convinced her to give him 51% ownership of the pawn shop right after she came out of a coma. How Machiavellian is that? How are you today? I'm doing great. I have a movie poster I'd like you to look at. Check it out. Ooh, I'm getting excited. I have an autographed F-Fiction movie poster with about 13 signatures on it. This is truly amazing. Of course, this made Rick look bad to all of his fans, who thought he was a family man. It turns out that when Rick Sr. died, he didn't give his mother the full financial records of the business, which worried her because she thought she hadn't received the right records for more than a year. Besides the more than $500,000 in cash and silver that her husband had before he died, Joanne also said that Rick had stopped sending her money from the proceeds of her late husband's business. This is important because she used to get regular $25,000 checks from her son before her husband died. So Joanne went to court to get this allowance reinstated and made her son sign a formal declaration of account. As you can imagine, fans were worried about the situation. Joanne had filed a restraining order against her son so that he couldn't sell any of the family's property. The order also said that Rick couldn't move or hide any money or do anything else that could put the gold and silver pawn shop at risk. Add to that the fact that Rick had to pay some money in damages, give full accounts of all the assets, and stop using what could be seen as his mother's money, and you might find that Rick was having though Rick has laughed off this story by saying, "You know what, Sham? I'll let you hang them on the wall and we'll see what happens. If you sell them, you can have half the money." Now, who's the smart one? He thinks that his mother is being influenced to make some strange decisions by strange people who only want to benefit from her. In response, Joanne doesn't seem to be backing down. She wants everyone to know that while Rick has been enjoying his fame and the money from the family business, she has been left to live a life of uncertainty because she doesn't have any money to pay for her monthly medical bills and other costs. This is understandable because Joanne is 80 years old and has health problems that need care around the clock. If you have elderly parents, you know that these costs can add up to hundreds of thousands of dollars every year. Additionally, she will require all the assistance they can get, and it doesn't help that Rick only learned about the restraining order from the news. In response to this heartbreaking event, Rick said that he had been trying to get in touch with her for months but hadn't been able to. It must have been a shame for him to only hear from her through the lawsuit. As such, this was a huge blow for him to take. Sadly, Rick's future held even worse things. Unfortunately, Rick lost his son Adam to an overdose of fentanyl and methamphetamine in January 2024. Adam had gone missing earlier that year, and Rick's landlord found him unresponsive and called the police. Soon after, the Harrison family learned of their family member's death. Rick then posted a picture of himself and his son on Instagram with a quote that said, "In these hard times, it's important to respect the family's wishes." That's why many people sent their condolences while letting the family mourn their tragic loss. He was never on the show, but his presence in the family will be missed. For now, Rick is trying to get over his loss by running for office in Nevada. He might even be able to run for U.S. Senator in 2024. He was also inducted into the Kentucky Colonel, which is the highest honor given by the state of Kentucky. Let's hope that this will help him get over the many tragedies he had been through, like losing a family member young, and another while going through a shocking court case with someone he loved very much. This is the heartbreaking story of Rick Harrison from Pawn Stars.